Hello, welcome to the New Bedford Whaling Museum. During this 10-minute talk, I'm going to tell you about the first Japanese person to live in America. The length of a whaling voyage in the early 1800s went beyond pretty much anything that one could imagine. The sea was the wilderness. Whale ship owners, captains, and crews were taking huge risks in order to hunt and kill whales for the highest quality lubricants. They were traveling to uncharted parts of the oceans for an average of about 3 to 4 years, and in some cases, quite a bit longer. The following story demonstrates the profound changes in lives that these explorations produced. In 1841, Manjiro was a 14-year-old Japanese boy who lived in the tiny village of Nakahama, part of Tosashimitsu on the southern Japanese island of Shikoku. His father had died, and he began to work with 4 older young men to fish off the coast in order to support his mother and family. After heading out one day, a prevailing strong wind, known as the Black Current, blew Manjiro and his mates off course, many miles out to sea. During their distress, the fishing mates discovered a load of mackerel and just kept on fishing. The bad weather caused haywire on board their skiff. They lost fishing nets, oars, and even their tiller. The mariners had been blown about 225 miles off course. After grappling with huge rocks and coral, they managed to land on an island after the coral destroys their boat. They stay on the island for about 6 months, getting by on killing albatrosses and finding berries. One day, the men can see a ship in the distance, and they're pretty much overwhelmed with emotion and begin waving their hands. It's the ship John Howland with Captain William Whitfield and his whaling crew from Fairhaven, Massachusetts. They're hunting for sea turtles to feed the whalers when they spy the men on this island. The men on board the ship manage to get in close to the island and rescue this ragged foursome. The Japanese fishermen were greatly relieved and learned how to communicate on board with their rescuers, while they were amazed at their whaling expeditions. The young Manjiro was especially keen on learning as much as he can from the captain, who was finding that he's enjoying this experience, so they develop a relationship. Captain Whitfield offers to take the boy back to Fairhaven to get an education. Should Manjiro do this? He gathers his mates around, who are solemn about advising the young guy to do what he thinks is best. Manjiro agrees to accompany Captain Whitfield back to New England. He becomes known as John Mung. Because Japan was a closed society during this time period, Manjiro and his mates know nothing of other countries. Much of the outside world was not allowed on its shores. If whalers came nearby, they could only land outside Japan's harbors and stay for a limited time. Previous whaling crews swimming ashore as deserters would be jailed and tortured, so Captain Whitfield could not return the men to Japan. Instead, the ships traveled to Hawaii, a typical whaling stop at this time. Manjiro's mates find work and are welcomed by the government. The whaling ship eventually makes its way back to Fairhaven, Mass. Thus begins this unique episode in the life of Manjiro, Captain William Whitfield, in the seafaring town of Fairhaven. Captain Whitfield and Manjiro disembark from their ship and head home to 11 Cherry Street in the Oxford Village neighborhood of Fairhaven, where the captain introduces his young charge to his sister, along with some neighbors who begin to slowly welcome the young Japanese boy to a New England home. It's difficult for young Manjiro at first, but he's fascinated by the religious rituals, especially marriages and funerals. Whitfield took Manjiro with him to the Congregational Church, but Manjiro was allowed to sit only in the, quote, Negro pews. Whitfield left the church and was welcomed by the Unitarian Church, where Manjiro was welcomed and allowed to sit with the Whitfields. Eventually, Whitfield moves to Sconnecut Neck in Fairhaven, builds a small home, which Manjiro helps him to build, And he begins a farm, and Manjiro helps him to work on the farm. Manjiro is introduced to the one-room stone schoolhouse in Fairhaven, and he begins to learn the English language. Later at school, Manjiro shows a strong aptitude for math, and Whitfield works hard to get him into the Bartlett School of Mathematics and Navigation on Spring Street in Fairhaven. Manjiro was also thrilled to learn to ride a horse on the farm, which would have been reserved only for the samurai in his native Japan. Later, Manjiro was apprenticed to a cooperage in New Bedford as well. He's not very happy there. His cottage room is cold, there's not much food available, but he does learn how to build barrels, which figures pretty well into his skills that he developed for working on a whale ship later on. So after about 5 years in 1849, Manjiro's missing his mother and his homeland, and he gets the chance to head out on a whaling voyage with a Captain Davis on the ship Franklin. Little did he know that he would not see Fairhaven again for quite some time. He visits his former mates in Hawaii during his whaling voyage, and they plan together to try to make it back to Japan. Manjiro also works for a time in California during the gold rush and saves enough money to board a ship back to Japan in 1851. His mates and he were successful in getting back there, but were quarantined by the Japanese government for about a year and a half. They did, however, eventually make it back to their homes. This would have been around 1853. During the time of this quarantine, Manjiro communicates his new skills to the Japanese government, and they recognize his abilities. He's able to do some translating. He's especially interested in telling them what he's learned about living in the West, and they're pretty curious to find out. Eventually, the United States brokered a treaty with the Japanese in 1853, sending Captain Matthew Perry to negotiate the Treaty of Friendship, right around the time that Manjiro gets back there. Manjiro was honored with a last name and was given the rank of a samurai for his help in this particular episode. After that, Manjiro rose to prominence in government circles. Twice, the Japanese government sent Manjiro on diplomatic missions to the United States. On the second trip in 1870, he revisited Fairhaven, staying once again with the Whitfields. Manjiro was widely recognized as being the first Japanese person to live in America. It was a momentous experience for Manjiro and for the many people of Fairhaven he encountered. With his new skills and his learning the English language, he was able to lead a new life in Japan. He began a family. He opened up a navigational school for young men. He translated Nathaniel Bowditch's New American Practical Navigator into Japanese. He wrote a widely used textbook entitled Shortcut to American Conversation and was later appointed professor to Kasai University, which later became Tokyo University. Manjiro's son, Dr. Toshiro Nakahama, came back to Fairhaven in 1918 with the Japanese ambassador to Washington at the time, Viscount Ishii, to present a samurai sword to the town as a token of gratitude for the many kindnesses given his father. The son of Captain Whitfield, Marcellus, and his 4 sons were there to receive the town's Japanese guests. The Millicent Library in Fairhaven has a collection of Manjiro memorabilia on permanent display there at their public library. Though the wounds of World War II took a number of years to recover from, Fairhaven never forgot Manjiro's stay there during the 1840s. In the fall of 1987, the Fairhaven New Bedford Tosa Shimizu Sister City Committee was formed to further promote international cooperation and friendship between those two communities. Crown Prince Akihito visited Fairhaven at that time. Also, a Manjiro festival sponsored by the Sister City Committee is held in Fairhaven in early October in odd-numbered years. The festival featuring Japanese and American foods, arts, and entertainment, celebrates the sister city relationship and the bond that has survived for more than a century and a half. If you would like to learn more about Manjiro, please come visit his special exhibit at the New Bedford Whaling Museum on our main level.